Hello BookTube, this is Aaron from Aaron Read a Book or Aaron Read a Book. Gonna do my top 10 books of the year as everyone does. I'm not going to do a lot of preamble, let's go straight into it. Book number 10 on the list. I'm not going to do also sort of also rans. I don't what's also mentioned sort of ones, but it was really hard to get this down to 10. I read, as of today, I've read 100 books this year, and I'm probably going to finish 101. And I've read a lot of good books this year, but number 10, we're going number 10. And this was a bit of a surprise to me. It's John le Carré's The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. And it was a surprise because I had already read the first book in this series, which is I can't even remember what it's called. Call for the Dead, and it's the George Smiley series. And I wasn't majorly fussed about it. I thought it was sort of average. And then I skipped the second book, and I saw everyone on BookTube was reading this earlier in the year, or maybe it was late last year, and I thought I'd give it a go because I found it in a charity shop or something, and absolutely loved it. It's a Cold War story set in East Germany, and it's about a spy who his entire network has been killed, and he's sort of called back to the circus, the London's what like they call the circus, and it's the headquarters in London. And so he's sort of called in from the cold, as it were, and then he's given a mission to go back to East Germany and pretend to be a defector. And it's not very long, it's kind of shortish, dark, very twisty, it's a very thrilling book, and it never outstays its welcome. It's sort of the perfect length, perfect complexity, perfect amount of twists and turns. It kind of reminds me of like a really good Agatha Christie, where it's just a perfect balance. This is like Christie can do a perfectly balanced crime book. This is a perfectly balanced spy book, and it was a very nice surprise. I would definitely want to read more Le Carré now. So if you ever read The Call for the Dead and weren't that into it, definitely give at least this one a try. Book number 9 is unusual for me in that it is a novella, and I tend towards the chunkier book normally because I love characterization in my books, and I like to delve into the characters. So novellas don't normally. I often enjoy novellas, but they don't go up to that next level for me, just because they normally lack the depth. But this one really impressed me. I read this for Shorty September, and it's a chess story by Stefan Zweig. I don't know if I never say that right. It's from 1942, and it's also known as either Chess or The Royal Game. It's an Austrian book, and it's about I'm a big chess fan, so maybe that's why I love this book so much. But I do think it's interesting even if you're not a chess fan. Basically, it's about this unnamed narrator on a cruise ship, and on the cruise ship the world chess champion is there, and you get his background. He's like an idiot savant who is only good at chess, and I think he grew up in a monastery, and the monks discovered that he was a chess prodigy. His backstory is quite interesting, and the ship kind of get together, and there's this kind of brash American guy, I think, who really wants to play him, and he agrees to play the the entire ship basically, or anyone who's interested, a group of people, and then I think they lose the first game, and then in the second game they're losing again, and this stranger comes over called Dr. B, and he helps them rescue the position and get a draw. And there's a mystery around this Dr. B. Why is he so good at chess? And he mentions that he hasn't played in years, and his backstory is then revealed, and it's utterly fascinating. It's he was sort of tortured by the Gestapo, and he was in Austria, and he was tortured by the Gestapo because he worked for the royalty, and he kind of rescues his sanity through stealing a book of past masters' games of chess, and the whole novella's again just perfectly paced, and again doesn't like The Spy Came from the Cold, doesn't outstay its welcome in any way. It's perfectly balanced, and it's sort of a psychological study, and yeah, so it involves Nazis and World War II and stuff as well, but it really is a very simple story, and I just found it utterly compelling. Book number 8 is another novella, so maybe my tastes are changing, and this is again from another event, and that was Duifon, which is the Welsh language event. I can't remember when it is, maybe March. This book was recommended by Heather from Too Many Heathers, so shout out to Heather, and it's the Blue Book of Nebo by Manon Stefan Ross, and like I said, this is a novella, and I think it's about 120 pages, and it was originally written in Welsh but translated into English by the author herself. So this is a post-apocalyptic novella, and it's written in diary form by 2 of the characters. There's only 3 characters in this really, which is a mother, a child, and an even younger child, a young daughter. So, but it's mostly about a mother and son relationship, and they're in rural Wales. The apocalypse has happened, and they don't really know anything about it. They know it's happened, but they never travelled in to find out what had happened. At first, their neighbours are there as well, and but they both die, and it's just this family, and it's sort of a coming of age story as well, because the boy is a teenager and he's learning to do stuff on the farm and help them live off the land and things. There is a slight element of mystery because the young girl, the young child, is younger than the apocalypse, and the boy doesn't understand where she's come from, sort of thing, because they obviously don't have the same parents, because she's been born in the last few years. But the main focus of the book is this sort of coming of age story and the mother and child relationship, and coming to terms with like this new world that they live in, and it's very emotional and hard hitting and very well characterized for a book of only 121 or 120 pages. But yeah, I just love the kind of dueling diary format as well, and it's a hard hitting one. It's lovely as well, lovely writing. It reminded me of my favourite post-apocalyptic book, which is Earth Abides. It has those living off the land elements, but it's sort of more emotional than Earth Abides. Very, very good, and I recommend it if you want to try a Welsh language book. My 7th favourite read of 2024 is actually a book published in 2024, which is almost unheard of for me. Most years I end up going through the entire year without even reading a book from that year, but This year I have, and it's The Trouble with Mrs. Montgomery Hearst by Katie Lumsden, who is, of course, Katie from Books and Things, who's a booktuber. Yeah, this I'm always kind of scared to read booktuber books because what if I don't like them? It's hard to review them, isn't it? But I just genuinely loved this from the start. So I needn't worried, and I do need to go back and read Kate's first book now. Although I'm less interested in gothic things, this is basically influenced by all my favourite Victorian and Regency writers in Jane Austen, Trollope, and Elizabeth Gaskell. Basically, the plot is we follow Amelia, who is the young daughter of the local brewer who runs the factory. So you have the kind of North and South Gaskell vibes there, but really it's probably more like Cranford in that it's quite a gossipy novel, and there's lots of little characters in the village of Wickenshire. I wrote it down. And you follow loads of these little characters, so it is that's Cranfordy vibes. And the Mrs. Montgomery Hearst of the title is sort of a surprise arrival in that this local, I think he's a lord or something, everyone expects him to marry Amelia, and all of a sudden he turns up with this wife who already has children and is a divorcee. So that's kind of scandalous in itself. Everyone's surprised apart from Amelia herself, who is actually already in a relationship, but it's a gay relationship, a lesbian relationship. So it's an interesting look at that, and I don't think I'd ever read a book about that before. So that part was very interesting, but generally it was just a delightful read. It's quite big, but I flew through it in like 2 days, just because it has all those wonderful elements of Gaskell and Trollope and Austen. It's kind of got elements of Trollope's The Way We Live Now, I think, more than other Trollope. But Trollope's my favourite Victorian writer, and Jane Austen's obviously my favourite Regency author. So, and this is the modern sort of book that I think I've read that best captures those authors. And it doesn't really surprise me if you've ever watched Katie's channel. She's like an expert on that type of literature more than anyone else. So it doesn't surprise me that she's managed to capture the essence of that in this book. And it's just, yeah, if you have any doubts, do not. It's an absolute delight, and you'll fly through it. And my sixth favourite book of the year is a late entry, because I only read this a couple of weeks ago. That's Brat Farah by Josephine Tay, which is the third Josephine Tay book I've read after The Man in the Queue and The Daughter of Time, and my favourite that I've read. And this is not an Inspector Grant one, it's a standalone. And it's not really a murder mystery. It's about a boy called Brat Farah who's like an orphan. And you follow him, and he is trying to deceive a family called the Ashbys into thinking that he is the younger or the elder of two twins who had drowned sort of 8 years ago or so. And he comes into their lives, and he looks extraordinarily like an older Patrick, and he looks incredibly like an Ashby in general, and he is basically spotted in London by a cousin who knows the family very well. He's part of the family, but knows the main family very well, and he kind of coaches Brat Farah into becoming Patrick Ashby, because if Patrick Ashby is alive, he is set to inherit the this I don't know what's the word for horse farm, where they create racing horses and stuff. Stable, I guess, racing stable. But he's due to inherit that. It's not a massive amount of money, but it's better than nothing. So it's a doppelganger deception kind of novel, and it very much reminds me of The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith, in that you are following the con man, you are in the con man's head. But unlike Ripley, Ripley's kind of a sociopath. Brat Farah you kind of like and feel sorry for, because he is an orphan, he's had a hard life, and some of the people in the Ashby family that he's trying to deceive, mostly his twin brother, are not very likeable characters. But the rest of the family are lovely, and it's kind of like a found family story in a way, and he finds like love in a way that he's never experienced before as an orphan. But yeah, as well as having that element to it, is also a really interesting mystery, and you're constantly on edge thinking, oh, is he going to get caught out being Brat Farah and not being Patrick? Yeah, just brilliantly done mystery. Everything I've read by Josephine Tay's been really good, but this stood out really, really well. Book number 5, we're starting to get into the chunks of territory now, is The Small House at Allington by Anthony Trollope. This edition I don't really like, but it is almost square. It's a very strange copy. This is the 5th book in the Barsetshire Chronicles out of 6, and I also read the final book in that series as well, The Last Chronicle of Barsetshire. Was it that, or is it just called The Last Chronicle of Barset? Anyway, this is my favourite out of the two, but when I first finished it I wasn't that sure. But it's grown in my mind, and I think because it has quite an unconventional finish to it. Basically, this is the story of a family in a small house at Allington, and there's the large house just across the way from them, which is like the lord's house, the squire's house. And the family in the small house is the widow of the squire's brother. So yeah, the widow of the squire's brother, and her 2 daughters, Lily Dale and Belle Dale, and they're not very well off, but they've been allowed to live there because the squire's brother's memory, sort of thing. And the squire and the widow don't really get on that well anymore. They used to. More so when her husband was alive, and it's kind of a love triangle book, because the squire loves Lily and Belle like they're his own children, despite the kind of frostiness between him and their mother, and he wants Lily to marry his son, Bertrand. And Lily's a very charming character, Trollope is very good at women characters, and she's a very standout woman character, and his men are often not that desirable. They're often very multi-layered, we'll say. Bertrand's kind of harmless, but he has no real interest in Lily, and he brings a friend down to visit, Adolphus Crosby, and Adolphus Crosby, who is banker's clerk, is taken by Lily Dale, and she is charmed by him as well, but he slightly misunderstands the situation, and he thinks that she is going to inherit quite a lot of money from her uncle, the squire. But the squire has no plans for that. I think he just wants to pass it all on to Bertrand, and he's also annoyed that Bertrand is not marrying Lily. There's also another character in this, Johnny Ames, who also loves Lily Dale, and he's grown up with her. He's kind of a local boy who is poor, but he is taken sort of under the wing of a local what's the word, nobleman of sorts, and he slowly rises in life in London as well. And yeah, the story sort of plays out, and you follow Lily and you follow Johnny Ames as he goes into London to try and make something of himself, and you also follow Adolphus Crosby, and there's lots of even Johnny Ames, who's a great character, he has his bad side as well. The characters are very multi-layered. No one's entirely good or entirely bad, and Lily Dale herself can be frustrating, but the book really sticks with you after. I think almost more so than any of the other Barsetshire Chronicles. And I find it really hard to pick any favourite out of them. And I'll have to go reread them all. But the series as a whole is brilliant, and every single book is worth reading in it. So yeah, highly recommend. Book number 4 now, and this again is another Victorian novel that focuses on a family and another chunkster, and for the second year running, it's an Elizabeth Gaskell, and that is Wives and Daughters, her last and unfinished novel. So if you want to read this, be aware the last kind of couple of chapters are missing, but you kind of know what's going to happen. Well, you do know what's going to happen. And also, don't buy this version. Don't buy Penguin Classic, because there's a spoiler in the footnotes in the middle of the book, which did drive me insane. Basically, this story, it feels a bit like a mixture of Cranford and North and South, and basically every Gaskell novel I've read are quite different, and this feels more traditional, more like a Trollope novel, or Jane Austen novel. In this, we follow Molly Gibson, who is the young daughter of a doctor, and the opening scene of the book, she's set to visit the local Lord and Lady's manor house, the Lord Cummore's, and she kind of falls asleep under a tree and gets woken up by these two people, and she's terrified, and the governess, I suppose, who they all call Claire, puts her in her bed because she feels sick, and she falls asleep in the bed, and Claire forgets to wake her up, and she wakes up in the night, and all the other children who were visiting have gone. So she sort of has this situation where she's kind of blames Claire and is terrified of Claire, and then we zoom forward, and Molly Gibson is sent to another local gentry's house, this time the Squire Hamley, and his wife, and the reason she's sent this time is because one of the doctor's apprentices has fallen in love with her and wants to propose to her, and the doctor's like, there's no way you're proposing to my daughter. I'm sending you to the Hamleys, who are his friends. The doctor's friends with everyone in this village, and this has a very sort of local villagey feel like Cranford, and there's a couple of gossipy characters like Cranford, gossipy old characters, and Squire Hamley's worry is a very interesting character who sort of very gruff, but you kind of love him, and he doesn't want Lily. Molly, sorry, I'm calling her Lily Dale because there's quite a lot of similarities. But Molly Gibson, to meet up with his children just in case. Like, he's got two sons, Osborne and I've completely forgotten the other name of the other one. Yeah, I can't remember the other son's name. It may come back to me. But his two sons, he thinks basically Lilydale's below them. So the book is partially about, like a lot of Victorian books, sort of social class and stuff, and who you should and should be involved with. But anyway, while she's away with the Squire Hamley and Roger, that's the other son, her father comes to visit and sort of shocks her by saying, "Oh, I've married," and the person he's married is Claire, the woman whose bed she was in and who didn't wake her up in time, and who she was terrified of. And Claire's a very funny character as well, and she brings her daughter along, who is called Cynthia, and basically Cynthia's a mega babe and causes loads of issues in the novel because everyone falls in love with her, when really the sister you should be falling in love with is Molly Gibson. But it's again a very big, charming novel, and there's loads of stuff in there. Great characterization. Even though it's a big 800-page chunkster, it's quite laser focused on these sort of three families, mostly the two families, the Hamleys and the Gibsons, and yeah, it's just beautifully done, like all Gaskell's books, really beautifully done book. And it again, like The Small House at Arlington, it keeps coming back to me, like it's growing in my head the further away I get from it, and it's a book I know I will definitely reread multiple times. Right, into the top three now, and we move away from the Victorians all the way to 1945, and that is Nancy Mitford's The Pursuit of Love. If I was doing non-fiction as well, which I'm not including non-fiction in this, my favourite non-fiction book of the year is kind of the non-fiction of this book, which is Jessica Mitford's Ons and Rebels, because Nancy Mitford is borrowed liberally from her life, especially Jessica. This is the story of a family that grew up in the countryside, and their father is a lord, and it's told from the perspective of a cousin who often comes to visit because her mother keeps running away with men and they call her the Bolter, and she's brought up by an aunt, and they often go visit the family home. But really the main character, who's the narrator, Fanny, is Nancy, and it's mostly follows the story of one of the children of this family called Linda, who is based on Jessica Mitford. And this is a very eccentric family. They basically don't believe in any education for women, and their father's an absolute maniac, and it's a very, very funny book, especially the childhood parts. And in real life, the children kind of rebelled against this lack of education thing and became avid readers and writers, as Nancy became a writer herself. And we follow mostly Linda as she grows older and gets into relationships, and her first marriage is kind of a disaster, quite a sensible marriage to a banker's son, I think, and she hates she hates her child, which is controversial, and then she later marries a communist and runs away, which is what Jessica did in real life. But really, the family itself is what shines in this. How funny all the characters are, and Nancy's writing is like very acerbic and witty, and I love her writing. I've also read the follow up to this, Love in a Cold Climate, which is really good as well, but not quite as good as the first one. And I highly recommend Ons and Rebels by Jessica Mitford, which is the sort of non-fiction version of this. But yeah, if you like funny kind of 1940s 50s writers, if you like Barbara Pym or Muriel Spark or people like that, definitely give Nancy Mitford a try. Very funny. And my second favourite book of the year is the first ever body read I've ever done, and that was Amanda Scott's Boudica, Dreaming the Eagle. And I read this with Sarah from Your True Shelf, and if you watch her top 10, it's her number one. But it would be my number one if I didn't read a book that was kind of extraordinary and amazed me, which we'll get to in a minute. But this is a historical fiction, and it's the first of a 4-book series. They're all pretty chunky, and we are following the life of the Boudica, who is very famous in the town where Sarah and I grew up, which is Colchester in Essex. Her tribe are called the Iceni, and I used to play for a football team called the Iceni Wanderers, so I feel part of the Iceni. And she famously attacked Colchester as well, when it was the Roman capital of Britain, during the Roman invasion. So this first book follows her from early childhood. It actually starts with her first kill, which is sort of very, I think she's like 12, and her mother is killed at the beginning of the book, and she basically kills an invader in sort of defense of her tribe. And it follows, because I've read the second one of this, I'm trying to separate in my head where it goes up to, but it follows her early life and the life of her brother Bon, who is younger and kind of in her shadow a little bit. And it also is a lot just about the life of sort of Britain at this time, and how the Dreamers run the tribes, and there's a lot of tribal politics and stuff. It's almost quite Game of Thronesy really, but people aren't vying for the power of the Iceni. Basically, Boudica is destined to be their leader, because it's passed on down through the female side, and the Dreamers basically run everything anyway by dreaming things. I'm not explaining that very well, but there's lots of mysticism and stuff in there, and basically it's dealing with the Roman invasion of Britain and their defence of their lands. But the good things about this book are just how incredibly beautifully written it is, and the structure is amazingly good. Like Sarah says this in her review, you never feel like this is going too fast or too slow. And we would read 3 chapters at a time, and there was always loads of stuff to talk about every time. Like every time we were leaving each other a message, we were like, wow, loads has happened. This is really exciting. And it was just like the perfect first book to buddy read. And I'm so, like I said to Sarah the other day, we're so lucky that we picked this as my first buddy read, because it's just a joy to read, and yeah, perfectly paced. And it continues with the second one as well. The second one's just as good as the first, and we've got 2 more to go, so we'll see how that goes. And finally, the number 1 book of 2024 for me. I'm still fascinated by how this book came to prominence. If you've watched Gareth from Book Songs and Other Magic's video he did recently, where he asked 30 booktubers their favourite book of the year, you won't be surprised what I picked, or you will. You won't be surprised what this book is, because I picked it there. And it was the only book that more than one of the booktubers chose, and there was 3 of us that chose it. It was me, Crystal from Five Artsy, and Deb from Rainer Reads. And that book is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. And this is not a new book, it's a book from 1995. Jacqueline Hartman's dead, and her second highest rated book on Goodreads only has 300 ratings. And I had never heard of this book until recent years. Basically, it was first translated in 1997 and just didn't seem to do anything, I don't think. And now it was retranslated, well, it was the same translator, it was republished in 2022 and just seemed to somehow capture the imagination of BookTube through word of mouth, I think, basically. I know Emily Fox, who's a major booktuber, gave it a rave review, so that probably helped a lot. But since then it's kind of spread slowly through BookTube, and everyone seems to love it, and I can see why, because I think it's one of the great science fiction novels of certainly of the 90s, and should be a sci-fi masterworks. It's the story of 40 women, or really 39 women and 1 young girl, who are imprisoned in a cage, and they don't know how they got there, and their memories are kind of fuzzy about their previous lives. We follow the young girl, and she's the only one who's been there since she was a child. They know they've been there a long time because she's sort of grown up there, but the rest of the women kind of remember their previous lives, but don't know how they got there, and their memories aren't very good. And they're guarded by men who wear masks and have whips and open the cage and put food in and stuff, but have never spoken a word to them. So they have never known men. The title character has never known men. And the novel sort of starts changing when the young girl discovers that they don't do everything on a set schedule. She starts counting her heartbeats, and through that works out how many hours pass. They basically frequently drugged, so they don't really know when they're sleeping and stuff. And she discovers this sort of irregularities and starts to count time. And this is the first thing that's happened in the cage for years and years, so it's kind of a bit of a revelation to them. And then one day an alarm goes off as they're about to be fed, and the men run away, but they leave the key in the cage door. And the rest of the novel follows them as they escape, and it follows them for years and years, the rest of their lives. And it's really an unbelievably fascinating book about these women's lives and their friendships, and how they find hope in an incredibly strange and harrowing situation. And yeah, it's just it just really shocked me how good it is. It's not very long. I read it in 2 sittings, but it's just utterly compelling, and yeah, ultimately a book about sort of friendship and strength. It's quite feminist, really. But yeah, no surprise if you've been watching my channel, that's my favourite book of the year, and one of my favourite books ever, I would say. I do need to reread it to confirm that, but yeah, that will go down as one of my favourite books ever, and the only thing that could have beaten Boudica. So that's my top 10 of 2024 BookTube. Let me know if you've read any of these. I'm sure a lot of you have read them, and what you think of them. Have a good one, BookTube. Bye.